How can an entire village vanish without a trace in just one night? Detective Amelia Carter stared at the barren expanse before her. The area where the village of Rivenmore once stood was now nothing but an empty field, its borders marked only by a crumbling stone wall. No signs of houses, no footprints, not even the faintest whisper of life remained. It was as though the place had been swallowed whole by some invisible force. The previous morning, Rivenmore had been a quaint and bustling village, home to 200 souls. Farmers tended their fields, children played along the cobbled streets, and the local tavern echoed with laughter and music. But today there was nothing. The people, the buildings, even the livestock, all gone. Amelia's mind raced with questions. She had been summoned by the local authorities to investigate the disappearance. But even she, an investigator with years of experience solving the most bizarre cases, was at a loss. Villagers from nearby settlements spoke of strange lights in the sky the night before, of an eerie hum that seemed to vibrate through the ground. Did the village disappear naturally? Or was it taken? Amelia whispered to herself. Her heart skipped as she spotted something unusual near the edge of the field. A single shoe, lying on its side. Its weathered leather was smeared with what looked like mud? Or was it blood? Amelia crouched next to the shoe, inspecting it carefully. It was small, likely belonging to a child. Next to it, she noticed faint indentations in the ground, as if something heavy had been dragged away. Following the trail, she was led to the forest bordering the former village. The trees loomed tall and dark, their branches twisting together like skeletal hands. The deeper she ventured, the colder it became, and a strange mist began to swirl around her feet. Amelia could feel eyes watching her, though she knew it was just her imagination, or so she hoped. Halfway through the forest, she stumbled upon a strange circular clearing. At its center stood a weathered stone monolith, covered in symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. She traced her fingers over the carvings, feeling a strange warmth emanating from the stone. Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. "You shouldn't be here." Amelia spun around, her hand instinctively reaching for the revolver at her hip. Standing behind her was an elderly man with a long beard and a cloak made of patchwork fabric. His eyes glinted with a mix of fear and knowledge. "Who are you?" Amelia demanded. "My name is Elias," the man replied. "I am the keeper of the secrets of Rivenmore. If you value your life, you'll leave this place at once." Amelia frowned. "What happened to the village?" Elias hesitated, then sighed. "They awakened something they should not have. And now they have paid the price." Elias led Amelia to a hidden cave deep within the forest. Inside, the walls were covered in the same glowing symbols as the monolith. At the center of the cave lay a circle of blackened earth, surrounded by remnants of candles and offerings. "This is where it began," Elias said gravely. "The villagers of Rivenmore were desperate. Their crops had failed for years, and sickness plagued their children. In their desperation, they turned to the old ways, rituals forbidden by our ancestors." "What kind of rituals?" Amelia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elias pointed to a faded mural on the cave wall. It depicted a figure cloaked in shadows, with glowing eyes and outstretched hands. Around it knelt a group of people, offering sacrifices of food, animals, and even blood. They sought the favor of the Shadow Watcher, Elias explained, an ancient being said to grant wishes in exchange for a price. But the villagers were greedy. They asked for too much, and the Watcher grew angry. Amelia shivered. "So the Watcher took them?" Elias nodded. "The entire village, gone as if they never existed. And now the Watcher slumbers once more. But if you disturb this place—" He trailed off, his eyes filled with warning. Amelia's instincts screamed at her to leave, but her curiosity outweighed her fear. She took another step closer to the mural, tracing the outline of the shadowy figure with her flashlight. "Why hasn't anyone heard of this before?" she asked, glancing back at Elias. "Because those who know of it are smart enough to stay silent," Elias replied sharply. "The Watcher's power grows when it's spoken of. Every word about it is a whisper in its slumbering ear." Amelia frowned. But why now? Why did the village disappear after all these years? Elias hesitated, his gaze shifting to the blackened circle in the cave. Someone must have disturbed the balance. Perhaps a descendant of the villagers returned to this place, or maybe someone sought to awaken the Watcher again. Amelia's blood ran cold. The thought of someone knowingly invoking an entity capable of wiping out an entire village was chilling. She opened her mouth to question him further when a low rumble echoed through the cave. "What was that?" she whispered, her grip tightening on her flashlight. Elias paled. "It's too late. We've lingered too long." The ground beneath them trembled, and the glowing symbols on the walls flared brighter. A chilling wind swept through the cave, carrying with it a faint, guttural growl. The growl grew louder, reverberating through the walls of the cave. Amelia's heart pounded as she backed away from the circle of blackened earth. "What's happening?" she demanded, her voice rising in panic. Elias grabbed her arm. "You must leave now. The Watcher is awakening." Before they could move, the ground split open, and a column of darkness erupted from the center of the circle. It twisted and writhed like a living thing, its edges shimmering with an otherworldly light. From within the darkness, a pair of glowing eyes emerged, piercing, malevolent, and impossibly ancient. A voice followed, deep and resonant, echoing in Amelia's mind as much as in her ears. "Who dares disturb my slumber?" Amelia froze, her body paralyzed by fear. She couldn't tear her gaze away from the eyes, which seemed to pierce straight into her soul. "It wasn't me," she managed to choke out. "I didn't mean to." The Watcher's gaze shifted to Elias, who had dropped to his knees, his face pale with terror. "You again," the entity growled. "You swore to protect my sanctuary, yet you allowed this trespasser to defile it." Elias bowed his head. "Forgive me, Great One. I tried to warn her." Amelia's mind raced. This was impossible, beyond impossible. She had read about myths and legends, but to see one come to life before her eyes was beyond comprehension. The Watcher's gaze returned to Amelia, pinning her in place. "You do not belong here, mortal. Your presence disturbs the balance." "I didn't mean to disturb anything," she stammered. "I'm just trying to understand what happened to the village." "The village?" The Watcher's eyes glimmered with dark amusement. "Their fate was sealed by their own greed. They summoned me, sought my power, and paid the price." Amelia's breath hitched. "But why take all of them? The children, the innocents. Why didn't you spare them?" "Innocence does not absolve one from consequence," the Watcher replied coldly. "They were all part of the ritual, all part of the offering." Elias raised his head. "Please, Great One, show mercy. She is not like them." The Watcher seemed to consider this, its swirling form shifting and undulating. "Mercy is not in my nature. But perhaps a bargain can be struck." Amelia's stomach sank. "What kind of bargain?" The Watcher's eyes bore into hers. "I will return the village and its people. But you must take their place." Amelia's heart stopped. "Take their place? What does that mean?" "You will remain here," the Watcher said, its voice dripping with finality. "Bound to this place as my keeper. You will never leave, never see the world beyond these walls again. In exchange, the village will be restored." Elias grabbed her arm. "Don't do it. The villagers brought this on themselves. Their fate isn't your responsibility." But Amelia couldn't ignore the weight of the Watcher's words. The thought of 200 lives, children, families, resting on her decision was unbearable. Could she live with herself if she walked away? She looked back at the Watcher. "And if I refuse?" The Watcher's gaze darkened. "Then their fate is sealed. They will remain in the void, forgotten by time." Amelia closed her eyes, her mind racing. The idea of sacrificing her freedom, her future, was terrifying. But could she live with the guilt of condemning an entire village? Amelia's mind spun as she stood on the precipice of an impossible decision. The cave seemed to close in around her, the oppressive darkness pressing against her chest. "Amelia," Elias whispered urgently, "you don't owe these people anything. Their fate was sealed long before you got here." Amelia's voice trembled as she spoke. But they're still people. Families. Children who didn't ask for this. How can I walk away knowing I could have done something to save them? Elias shook his head. And what about your life? Your dreams? You'll lose everything, Amelia. The watcher observed in silence, its glowing eyes unblinking as it waited for her response. Amelia turned back to the swirling darkness. If I agree, will they remember? Will they know what happened to them? The watcher's voice was like a low growl. They will remember only fragments, like a fading dream. But they will live. That is all that matters. Amelia's heart ached. She thought of her parents, her younger brother who had always looked up to her, and the life she had envisioned for herself. It wasn't fair. None of this was fair. But as she pictured the faces of the villagers, terrified, lost in the void, she knew what she had to do. I'll do it, she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. I'll take their place. The watcher let out a deep, resonant hum, the sound reverberating through the cave. So be it. The swirling darkness surged forward, wrapping around Amelia like a living shadow. It was cold, so cold it burned, and she gasped as it seeped into her skin. Amelia! Elias shouted, lunging forward, but an invisible force flung him back. Amelia's vision blurred as the darkness consumed her. She felt her body grow heavier, her limbs rooted to the ground. The cave around her began to shift, the glowing symbols dimming as the watcher's power transferred to her. Through the haze, she saw the circle of blackened earth begin to glow. Figures started to materialize within it. Men, women, and children, their faces filled with confusion and fear. The villagers, Elias whispered, watching in awe as the people of Pine Hollow were restored. Amelia tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She felt herself sinking, becoming one with the cave, her body and mind tethered to the watcher's power. As the last villager appeared, the watcher's voice echoed in her mind. You are now the keeper of the hollow. Guard this place well, or their fate will be yours. The villagers stumbled out of the cave, their memories hazy and disjointed. Some clung to each other, weeping with relief, while others stared at their surroundings in bewilderment. Elias stayed behind, his eyes fixed on the spot where Amelia had stood. The glow of the symbols had faded, and the cave was eerily silent. She did it, he murmured, his voice heavy with grief. She actually did it. As he made his way out of the cave, he couldn't shake the feeling of guilt that gnawed at him. He had brought Amelia here, knowing the risks, and now she was gone. Sacrificed to save a village that might never truly appreciate what she had done. When he reached the surface, the villagers surrounded him, bombarding him with questions. What happened? Where are we? Who are you? Elias took a deep breath. You're back home, he said. You were lost, but now you're safe. Thanks to her. He pointed back toward the cave, but when the villagers turned to look, the entrance was gone. The hillside was smooth, as if the cave had never existed. Days turned into weeks, and life in Pine Hollow slowly returned to normal. The villagers rebuilt their homes, tilled their fields, and tried to piece together the fragments of their memories. But something had changed. The people were kinder, more grateful for the small blessings in life. Though they couldn't remember exactly what had happened, they all felt a deep sense of gratitude toward an unnamed savior. Elias stayed in the village, unable to bring himself to leave. He often found himself wandering the forest near the vanished cave, hoping for some sign of Amelia. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he found a small patch of wildflowers growing where the cave's entrance had been. Among the blooms was a single piece of parchment, weathered and fragile. Elias picked it up and read the words scrawled in familiar handwriting. Take care of them. Tell my family I love them. I'll always be watching. Tears filled his eyes as he clutched the note to his chest. Amelia was gone, but her sacrifice would never be forgotten. Deep within the heart of the mountain, Amelia sat on a stone throne, her body glowing faintly with the watcher's power. The cave was silent, save for the faint hum of the symbols etched into the walls. She was no longer the same person she had been. She could feel the energy of the hollow coursing through her, connecting her to every tree, every rock, and every life within the village. It was a lonely existence, but she found solace in knowing she had made the right choice. The villagers were safe and their lives would go on. As she closed her eyes, she whispered a silent prayer. May they live well. May they never forget the cost of their salvation. And with that, the keeper of the hollow watched over Pine Hollow, ensuring its safety for generations to come.